and thanks for joining us on another Google Hangout. Today's Hangout is multi-speed IT, or as some may call it, bi-modal IT. And I'm very lucky to have a great cast to discuss this topic with me today. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves. If you're following along on the bottom, our first guest is a friend of mine, Sanjeev Sharma. Sanjeev, why don't you give our audience a little bit of your background?
Thanks, Alan, and thanks for hosting this. So my name is Sanjeev Sharma. I am IBM's CTO for DevOps. I'm in the technical sales team. Work with customers, been in this role for around over 3 years, almost 4 years now, working with customers, helping them adopt DevOps. So, I'm very familiar and very interested in having a discussion today around what we are seeing in what I call real-world DevOps, right, where there is, organizations are not monolithic. They have different parts of the organizations moving at different speeds, which is what leads to what we call multi-speed IT.
Excellent. And next to Sanjeev, we are also happy to be joined by another friend of mine, and a Pittsburgh Steelers fan to boot, Carmen DeArdo. Carmen, you want to just let people know a little bit about your background?
Sure, Alan. Glad to be here with you and Sanjeev and Brad. I'm at Nationwide Insurance, so I'm sure that Wealth Commercials and Peyton Manning, of course, will be on the field on Sunday, unfortunately, since he beat our Steelers. But anyway, I digress. I'm in Nationwide. I'm a technology director who's helping lead some of the DevOps initiatives we have going on, particularly with continuous delivery and how we can accelerate our delivery to our business customers. And I think, as Sanjeev said, we have a large portfolio of applications. We started with Agile. We have over 200 Agile teams, and now we're moving to broaden that across the entire life cycle with continuous delivery and continuous visibility in order to make things available at an accelerated rate for our customers.
Excellent. Thank you, Carmen. And next to Carmen, a newcomer to our panels here at DevOps.com, Brad Schick of SkyTap. Brad, can you give our audience a little background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. I'm the CTO and VP of Engineering at a company called SkyTap based in Seattle. And SkyTap provides a public cloud service and targeted specifically at the enterprise. So we are selling to companies with large investments in existing IT, so the exact types of customers that would have two-speed or bi-modal IT. And what we are helping customers accomplish is bring some of the benefits that people have realized by adopting the cloud for newer, more modern, nimble applications and applying those benefits and those concepts to more traditional applications. And our product is designed specifically to help customers accomplish that. And so, mostly what our customers are doing are they're trying to optimize and modernize their applications, and that may mean both the technology components of their application as well as the processes. So DevOps and Agile software development are a major component of that effort for most of our customers. Did we lose Alan? He froze on my screen.
Alan, are you there? Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. It seems I might have lost you there for a moment. I apologize. At first I thought it was Brad who was lost, and then I realized it was myself. So, Brad, thank you. So, gentlemen, topic today, multi-speed IT. And that may be a term that is or is not familiar to people in our audience. And the reason is a lot of people are in the term of bi-modal IT. But whether we call it bimodal, multi-speed, variable speed, I think we should start off first with defining what it is we mean by this term of bimodal or variable speed or multi-speed IT. And Carmen, I've heard you define it now for 2 years plus, so I'm going to give you the chance to lay out that definition.
Okay, Alan. Well, from my perspective, as I said, we have, thousands of applications. We have over 20 different business areas. We have applications of various technologies. We obviously have systems of record and systems of engagement. And so from our perspective, what we want to do is really provide a basic capability, a foundational capability to allow areas to move as fast as they need to based on their own need for speed, risk, value, and then their own maturity level. So, for example, if you can do more automation, if you can provide, more certainty in terms of how fast you can certify a release, then you can move quickly. If you have a regulatory system where you need to go through more checks and to get through that process, then you may need to move more slowly. But the idea is to set up sort of that delivery highway so that it's up to the business and the business IT areas to determine how fast they can go. I talk about giving them the controls and dials so they can go as fast as they need to and are capable of, and then also give them visibility across that tool chain by integrating the various delivery capabilities together. So, we use different technologies to do that, which I'm sure we'll get into later, but that's kind of my goal, is to provide that capability to the business, and then they can decide and go as fast as they're able to based on their needs and their own capabilities.
So I think that's a very good analysis and thought on what exactly multi-speed IT is, because I think a lot of people get concerned or get hung up on the technology only side of it. Oh yeah, is this on the cloud? Is it not on the cloud? Is it cloud native? Is it cloud enabled? Is it cloud? Is it on-prem? Is it off-prem? And to me, the technology is something you do or something you adopt based on your business needs. So when we talk about multi-speed IT, it is IT at the speed of what the business wants or what the business needs. And the business can sometimes only consume that fast. So your IT organization might be able to really go fast and do continuous deployment and continuous release, but the business might say, no, I can't go that fast. You have to give me releases every quarter. Like, we are an ISV, right? We have, of course, SaaS offerings which we can update continuously. Speaking for IBM. But we also have server-based software, right, which runs on-prem in a customer's organization. So, for example, Nationwide uses some of ours, right? So, Carmen, I'm sure
right.
Your organization will be really unhappy if we send you updates, right, new versions of the software every 2 weeks, every time we do a sprint. You don't want that. You want, you want to have the ability to update when you want to update, right? And so we send you updates quarterly in most cases, with major updates maybe twice a year. So the rate of consumption also determines the rate. So multi-speed IT becomes a function of business need, coupled with the ability to consume, coupled with the ability to deliver based on the technology being used, which is why I like the term multi-speed IT over I don't want to get into a debate on terms here, rather than just saying it's fast or slow, right, where it started originally as a two-speed IT, and I think we have evolved to a much more nuanced view of the world.
Agreed, Sanjeev. Brad, what about you? What does this mean to you?
I think some of the points being made right now are important, and that people often assume that the goal is to go incredibly fast. And I think as both the other panelists here are saying, is that the goal really is to go at the speed that you need or that you want to be able to go. And so things that are, say, newer or have fewer dependencies or are not a core part of your business are often able to go very, very fast because there's a higher tolerance for mistakes and errors and glitches and problems. Whereas if it's, say, some sort of system of record and you cannot tolerate mistakes or hiccups or errors, then you might be going slower on purpose or by design. And I think the important components of DevOps and talking about multi-speed IT is identifying those different strata and making sure that they can keep up with the needs of the business and the products. And so what we're often looking for when we're talking to SkyTap customers is where are your constraints? So if you're releasing your front-end applications very quickly, are your back-end systems able to keep up with those demands? And often that's where the challenge lies, is that they are actually falling behind and they're not able to release at a speed that the business needs or the business wants. And that's the true problem. Not everything needs to be releasing every hour or every day or 100 times a week, as as many web products are proud of declaring.
Yeah, I agree, Brad. Some people think it's, well, he who releases most wins, or fastest wins, and I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Right.
I want to make 2 points on the issue of multi-speed IT, and I'll throw it at the panel to discuss. Number one, I think the fact of the matter is a lot of people have used this term of bi-modal or two-speed IT, to say, oh yeah, those old mainframe guys in the back. And it's become there's the mainframe and then there's the cloud, and that's why it's two-speed and it's bimodal. And it's sort of separate but equal. The mainframe guys drink from the mainframe water fountain, and the cloud guys drink from a cloud water fountain. And it just doesn't work, right? But I think there's much more, as I think all three of you have hit on, to multi-speed IT than just systems of record and systems of engagement, or mainframe versus cloud servers or what have you. I think today's modern enterprise is a better analogy, and I've said this before, is a Swiss watch, where you have gears that they're different sizes and they spin at different speeds, but they work together like a fine timepiece, right? A fine piece of machinery, and that, I think, is the goal, Brad, for what your customers, and Sanjeev, what your customers, and what you want to accomplish, Carmen, which is having things act in concert so that we don't have bottlenecks and constraints.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And I would add, though, that I do think that there are lessons both in process and technology that you can take from more modern development approaches, things that may have been born in the cloud, that you can apply to more traditional applications. So I think that the push towards microservices and well-factored applications is a lesson that you can apply to more traditional, perhaps monolithic applications. And it's not true that all old applications are monolithic, but when you're deploying applications in the cloud, it actually has forced some behaviors and some architectural approaches that I think are starting to get broader acceptance and understanding that those are good techniques, sort of regardless of where your deployment approach is. So there are lessons you can take. It's not, I totally agree, it's not that cloud is fast and non-cloud is slow, but there are things that people have done partially because they developed in the cloud, and it forced certain behaviors and certain architectures, and those lessons can be applied elsewhere.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a very important fact to consider, is the architecture at the end of the day becomes a major bottleneck, right? I mean, there's this, you in a train, right? You go as slow as the slowest caboose, right? Or in an assembly line, right? The station which is the slowest, that's how fast the assembly line can go. I remember this, and I think somebody had that video they posted on DevOps also. This whole old I Love Lucy episode where Lucy is supposed to be wrapping these candy bars, right? And the candy bars are coming too fast, so she starts eating them, and after a while, like, she's got candy bars all over, in her pockets, in her clothes, in her mouth, and because she's going too slow. So this decoupling of what you spoke about from an architectural perspective of components, so that they can be released independently at a speed, and this, for lack of a better term, this component which is moving at a slower pace does not become a drag on your ability to release something, is I think what we need to focus on when we talk about DevOps in a bi-modal IT world. So you have to introduce efficiencies both horizontally in each component's delivery pipeline and vertically across delivery pipelines, so that you are not going as slow as the slowest delivery pipeline. So one has to have that two-dimensional view of what one is releasing and how one implements release automation. So I don't know, Carmen and Brad, if you would like to comment on that from your engineering practices, how you implement that, or do you look at it the same way?
Yeah, I think there's two important points, right, that you were talking about. One, Brad mentioned, I think, the whole idea of going as smaller batch sizes, right? I mean, typically we've bundled a lot of work and we thought there was efficiency in bundling when in fact having to manage all those dependencies, and if you look at the state of the DevOps reports, it shows if you can deliver smaller things more frequently, you're going to be not only more responsive, but you're going to be more productive and have higher quality. So that's a cultural issue that you sort of have to get through, because typically, especially large enterprises, thought there was some efficiency to bundling work when rather really it was, you know, causing harm with all these dependencies. And then the other thing is visibility. A lot of times I use the example of cars, and if you can't see, right, if it's foggy or whatever, you slow down. If you're not sure of what you're doing, you slow down. So part of of speeding up delivery is having visibility and knowing exactly what are these changes that you're delivering, what are they impacting, and giving you more confidence then through automation to be able to get that degree of certainty, the certifications that you need. A lot of times people will say to me, well, are you saying that we're going to change our criteria for delivery? And I'm saying no, right? We still have performance, or performance, quality, usability, security, obviously very important. The idea is to get there more quickly through more automation, automated tests, visibility of the work, and then decoupling those dependencies as much as possible, so that you can get something out more quickly, get that feedback to the business, and then they can decide what they need to do now, as the next step to grow their business.
Yeah, another thing I would add about lessons taken from more modern services, like take infrastructure as a service, for example. One of the things I think that's done to help the DevOps and the DevOps world for more traditional applications is kind of demonstrate or provide an opportunity for developers to be more involved with the application's lifecycle throughout, all the way into production. And again, that's something that I think people became capable of doing with the introduction of infrastructure as a service from various providers. And it's sort of now being called DevOps. And the idea of applying that to more traditional applications, I think, is really important. Is that's a key lesson. It doesn't mean that your application has to be deployed in infrastructure as a service to be following DevOps-like principles. But those ideas kind of evolved there, and I think everyone has come to realize that you can follow those same approaches with traditional applications that are deployed on premise. The goal is to have your development teams be responsible and feel ownership for their application all the way throughout into production, and your operations teams to be involved with feature design and delivery from kind of inception all the way to production as well, instead of having that more traditional handoff kind of waterfall mode. And sometimes I think when people talk about bi-modal IT, they assume that split is permanent and that you can't apply those lessons from one to the other, which I think is frankly, is incorrect.
Right, and to our point of why, when I, set this Google Hangout up, I didn't call it bi-modal IT, but multi-speed IT.
Yeah.
Is I think bi-modal IT, and again, no, Gartner can call it whatever they want. They've certainly earned the right, but calling it bi-modal IT does a disservice to the multifaceted nature of it. And to this whole concept of two independent streams that never seem to meet.
Yeah.
Guys, I understand that we are streaming live now, and I know we got off to a little bit of a late start on that, but thank goodness that this is all being recorded. I wanted to also mention that this is the same subject matter that the three of you are going to be on a panel at IBM's Interconnect conference. Later this month in Las Vegas, where we'll be discussing this in greater depth. And I wanted to use today's Google Hangout to sort of kick that discussion off. And what's nice for those of you who weren't able to join us at the beginning of the stream, we have Brad Chick, who is the CTO, VP of SkyTap, and Sanjeev Sharma, CTO of IBM DevOps. And we have Carmen DeArdo from Nationwide, who's really kind of led the DevOps transformation at Nationwide. And the beauty of it is all three of you are dealing with large, or a part of large enterprises, where this is a real, this is not some textbook exercise, right? This is real. How are we moving organizations who have legacy infrastructure, legacy applications? How, whether we call it DevOps or DevOps in name only or whatever have you, how do we move them along? How do you get, how do you not bifurcate, if you will, the ITs or the IT functionality as we add new technologies? Carmen, you know, though you may not deal with a lot of organizations, you have a ton of hands-on with your own organization, and how would you address that?
So yeah, I think, and you've heard me talk a little about this before, right? We really began our journey about 7 or 8 years ago with Agile, and really went to how can we have Agile as across the entire enterprise, right? Not just in bits and pieces. So we would apply Agile practices. So there's management practices, there's engineering practices. And from day one, we started with the management practices with all teams, all technologies. So we started with mainframe teams where we were doing 2-week iterations, show and tells, planning, and we got some strange looks initially, and but we went from 3 or 4 lines to today. Most of our work is done in an Agile way. We have over 200 lines, and we got a lot of good results from that. But we also have a large lean presence. My boss just wrote a book on Lean IT Field Guide, Tom Pater, with Mike Orzen. And when you look at the value stream, what you find is, Agile's sort of in the middle. So we've optimized that part of the value stream where we could go very quickly, right? So from the time a story gets in a backlog to a set of iterations, we could go very quickly. However, when you talk to a team, they're waiting for things, right? They're either waiting for work because we didn't have continuous flow into the team, or they're waiting for environments, sort of the things Brad gets into, infrastructure as a service, or they're waiting for other teams to do something, which gets, again, into this whole microservice, API management, service virtualization kind of view. So you really have to look at that value stream, and Sanjeev, I know, does a lot of this with customers, where it's like, from the time you get a concept to the time that you're delivering, right? Lead time is not just code commit to deploy. It starts when a customer has a thesis of hypothesis about what they think will add value to where you can actually deliver that and give them feedback. And when you look across that value stream, you find lots of opportunities that are wait states, waste, that you have to start to address. And I think that's where all of these DevOps practices then, and culture, I think, then could be applied. And I know Sanjeev could probably talk more, because I know he does this with many customers.
Right, and I think this is actually a practice we have within IBM. We do a whole workshop. It's a half-day workshop. We call it, the official name is DevOps Innovation and Optimization Workshop. With all due respect to my marketing folks, that's what they came up with. But essentially, it's a value stream mapping exercise, right, where we are looking at a delivery pipeline within an organization, right? If you're using, something like SAFe, you would call it an agile release train, right, an ART. And you look at it, and what you're doing is you're seeing the line of business push in requirements at one end, and then you got code running in production giving business value at the other end. And the idea is to look for where the bottlenecks are, very similar to what Brad mentioned earlier on. Where are the inefficiencies? Where are the blockers, right? And some bottlenecks will be internal to that delivery stream. That's where actually we started, right, where we're looking at it horizontally. And as I mentioned earlier, we also then find blockers or inhibitors or inefficiencies, bottlenecks, whatever you want to call them, which are external to the delivery stream, right? That means there are dependencies on other delivery streams or actors external to it. That's where the whole multi-speed IT question comes in. Because if I want to release a business function, let's say I'm an insurance company, right? And I want to have this ability to take pictures from my mobile app and start a claim adjudication right from the scene of an accident, right? Well, nothing's really happening in the app other than taking the picture. So there's nothing going on really from a business perspective in the mobile app. the business capability, to me, the customer is coming through components or services which might be spread over multiple delivery pipelines. And those delivery pipelines might have something running on a mainframe, something running on in the cloud, something running on, the technology doesn't matter, right? When I'm the user standing at the corner in the rain trying to take a picture of my car which got a dent, we got into a fender bender, I don't care whether something was containerized or not. All I care about is it giving me the business capability I need at the speed and the ease with which I need it, right? That's what the business is trying to provide. So if you look at it from that perspective, from a pure business perspective, you have to look at those bottlenecks horizontally and vertically within the delivery pipeline and across delivery pipelines, and then look at it, which one of them can be addressed by technology and which one of them have to have a cultural change in order to address, because that becomes quite frankly, the bigger bottleneck and takes longer time to change. The cultural part, right? How do I get people to get off that whole thinking of not my problem, right? Oh, I can't make that team change how they do something. That's how they deliver it, right? Or, oh, that's the process they used. We hate it, but that's how they want it, right? They'll only meet you at 7 a.m. on Thursday mornings to give you their requirements. That's cultural change. And in fact, I wrote a blog post recently on overcoming cultural inertia. To me, that's the biggest issue. But the rest can be addressed with technology and automation. And I know Nationwide has done a great job using different levels of technology in order to create these integrated delivery pipelines.
Carmen, I'm curious if you had the need at Nationwide to reorganize teams in order to accomplish, agile and DevOps in your more traditional components and services. Because one of the things that we've seen is that there's, just like Sanjeev was saying, sometimes there's this huge organizational inertia against these kinds of things because people have sort of the responsibilities and silos carved out, and that's the way they want it. And it's difficult to overcome. And we've seen, I'm not going to name names, but we have a customer that's a large telco that felt like the way they need to start with this is to change the structure of their teams, and they combined development, QA, and operational teams into sort of feature functional teams that didn't have silos anymore. They said, you're a new team and you're responsible for shipping this component, and you're all together as one to kind of push this newer DevOps and enforce it or encourage it through organizational structure.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Brad. I mean, so when we started with Agile, there was a big change to the point of even changing the furniture, right? I mean, we now brought people together, sit together. We started small. We started with kind of this concept of a model line where we had a few areas and we tested it and said, okay, is this working? And then how can we expand on this, right? A lot of lean concepts went into that. But so we started with teams 12 to 24, which were cross-functional teams in terms of there was a product owner, a scrum master, testers, developers, requirements analysts. We went to the point where automated testing and development basically became the same job family, right? So for a story, you could either write the code or you could write the automated test, right? And so when we looked at DevOps, then we said, again, okay, that's working well, but we still don't have the plumbing, right, to feed this teamwork, right? So it's connecting the backlog of that Agile team with the business portfolio, and really having, a structure that'll allow that to happen, to do more integrated planning. So we're actually going through some additional transformation right now in order to try to streamline some of these concepts to bring work to the teams with the concept of more of a product view versus a project view, right? A lot of times companies organize around projects. They bring people together, the projects happen, the people scatter. Projects are temporal things. What you want to build are these teams that are self-empowered, cross-functional, aligned to products, and then feed them the highest value work for that product through the pipeline. And then I think, again, streamlining that through the deployment side, right? So it's not just through these iterations and now we wait 2 months to deploy. It's getting those deployment capabilities more self-service, as you said. So, we're working right now with some of the IBM products and Urban Code and really trying to provide more of a concept where the teams themselves have the ability to do more of the deployment, and it's not all these handoffs to other organizations who are responsible. And there is a lot of culture change around that, because there was this view sometimes that if I own the tool, I also execute what that tool does and I govern it. And it's like, well, those are three different types of standard work, right? Supporting a tool is different than designing the process to use it, and different than who should be executing it. So there's a lot of work. We have this model of practices and culture, and there's a lot of work with culture and organization that you have to align as you're going through this transformation to get the results that you want.
Agreed. Guys, if I can just interrupt 1 second, I want to, for our audience, there is a Q&A section if you go on the left-hand side of your Google Hangout screen, and I believe you have the ability to ask questions. And we are going to try to get some questions. If you put them in there, we'll try to answer them. You could put them in, and I'll try to fit them in as we go. I know some of the questions were around us not broadcasting, which we've overcome now. So if you have questions, please feel free. That being said, let me kind of pivot us a little bit here. And, when we talk about bi-modal IT, I think we tend to focus on systems, technology, tools, servers. What about sort of multi-speed IT in terms of humans, right? We see this, and it's not just the dev and the ops. I saw a great T-shirt that said the sysadmin, because even developers need heroes. But it's not just dev and ops. It's the security people. It's the QA people. It's the different people that make up a team that function at different levels, at different speeds. And again, how do we meld them into a fine-tuned machine? And Carmen, again, this is something I'm gonna you probably have led it nationwide. Though Brad, you've probably seen it both at SkyTap and at customers.
Yeah.
And Sanjeev as well. The people element of multi-speed IT. What about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've jokingly said in the past is I think DevOps should actually be called DevOps QAPM InfoSec or something like that, right?
Yeah, that'll work.
It's the point isn't that. I think that the reason the word DevOps exists today is that that's where there was traditionally the biggest divide, was between developers and operations. But to succeed in any of this, I think the main point is that all of those different parties need to be aligned around a common goals and measured by common metrics that are driven by the business rather than things that are specific to their function. And so I completely agree that people are the key to this. I mean, that's the main. I think the main piece of lacking expertise in traditional systems is that lack of integration, and that the sort of the more traditional movement to waterfall or separate silos. I sometimes joke that it's easier to describe what DevOps is with examples that are counter to it. And so a counter to DevOps, I think, is a dev team that's bonused or incented based on shipping features, and an operations team that's incented by availability or uptime, right? Like, neither one of those things are business goals, and you can succeed at either one of those and still fail. And so I think that all those different teams, whether it's Dev, Ops, QA, PM, InfoSec, need to be aligned and incented together around the success of the business, success of the features, and be on the hook for delivering those things. I like to joke that the best way for an operations team to have 100% availability is to have no customers, right? Like, if no one uses your system, it'll probably never fail. So that sort of weird optimizations can apply to any of those teams if they're not incented and motivated correctly. So I think that's a huge part of this is aligning all those people and incenting them around common goals that are focused on the business.
Fair enough. Sanjeev, I'll let you go next on that, if you don't mind.
I was eager because I think the best T-shirt I have seen and the best poster I've seen for DevOps says everyone is responsible for delivering to production, right? And there the key is everyone. And I remember I was at this company, and I won't take the name, where the VP of DevOps, and they actually had his title, and we'll go into definition of, we won't go into argument of a DevOps team versus non-DevOps team here. But he says the attitude he wants the people in his organization to have is that everyone is responsible. So if the coffee machine is broken and developers or ops people have to walk outside and spend 20 minutes because they need to go to the nearest latte shop to get their caffeine fix, and the release to production gets delayed by 20 minutes, the coffee machine maintenance guy is not responsible for a delay to release to production, right? If the janitor is cleaning the restroom, because of that people have to go to a different floor, and then this time wasted, now the janitor is responsible for delay, right? If the CFO doesn't release money at the right time, and some contractors have to be furloughed, right, towards the end of the year because budgeting wasn't done properly, the CFO is not responsible for a delay for release to production. When you get that attitude, then then you got something going in terms of a people and culture perspective. Another poster I've seen within IBM is of whitewater rafting, and I've never gone whitewater rafting, don't intend to, but one of the points somebody made to me was that there are no passengers in whitewater rafting, right? You can't be a passenger. Everybody has a goal, and if everybody doesn't coordinate with each other, you're going to get a flipped over raft and a lot of white water where you don't want it. People in the white water where you don't want it. So I think that's the thinking. Is that easy to attain? Of course not, because people are stubborn, people are used to, people have inertia, culture has inertia. And if Carmen, you or Brad, you have experiences of how you overcome that, I would love to hear about it, because I loved sharing one success story with another success story at another organization, because I think that kind of thinking when it comes to people and culture is the key to success when it comes to DevOps.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, one of the things that kind of the phrases we use is we want to think horizontally, right? So we want to think across the value stream rather than within our silos. And it is interesting when you talk to people. Many times when so one of the things that we've been doing for the last few years is to build this integrated continuous delivery pipeline, right? So we'll talk to people in different areas, and you ask them, what do you do? What are your inputs? What are your outputs? And many times, it's like, well, what happens next? And it's like, well, I don't know, and I'm not blaming them, because it's not really that they don't want to know or they're choosing not to know. It's just the culture was, I don't know, something happens after that, I don't know. That's sort of like outside of what I'm doing. And so it's getting people to actually see that horizontal stream that's really adding value, because in the end, that's what it's all about, right? You have to you have to be delivering value to your customer, and whatever's in the way of doing that, as Sanjeev said, if it's a coffee machine, and sometimes it can be your financial processes, right? We found early on in Agile, when we were implementing it, that we really were optimizing our financial reporting processes at the expense of some of our IT processes. So the idea that people now would not be allocated to a project, but you would just allocate a team, and those team would just charge to, they're on this team working on the work that they're getting, that created ripples in how we would report financially on it. And it was like, well, if we really believe that we're going to succeed with IT, we have to start to, allow our funding and our financial processes, to allow this to happen. So a lot of cultural issues there, but I think it's around, trying to get that horizontal mindset and thinking, what's my role and what's my part in adding value to what we're delivering for the business.
Fair enough. Just wanted to quickly bring in, there was a question out of the audience, maybe more of a comment. So let's be clear. So Brad and Carmen, it doesn't, the comment was, Brad and Carmen don't seem to really be believers in bi-modal IT. and since they are proponents of teams with unified goals. And I don't know, maybe something was lost in my translation. Is that Carmen, Brad? I'll let you guys answer for yourselves.
Well, I'm a firm believer that it exists, and whether it's called bimodal or multi-speed, absolutely, there's no way around it. In fact, I think what we were, the very beginning of this thread, I think several of us were trying to say that there are going to be different speeds for delivering things, and there actually needs to be. There are business reasons to deliver things at different speeds. Not everything can be released, hourly or daily or 100 times a day. That doesn't make sense for all products. And so I definitely would not say that I'm not a believer in it. I think sometimes bimodal IT is used as a description for old and new, cloud and pre-cloud, things like that, and there's a very hard line drawn and said these are inherently different, and you cannot take lessons from one and move it to the other, and that I'm not a firm believer in. I actually think that there are reasons for shipping things at different speeds, and there are lessons that you can take from different technologies and different processes and apply them across the board.
Carmen?
Yeah, I guess I'll give my Autobahn example here, Alan. I mean, when I first would read about bimodal, it was almost like you were going to build another highway, right? So we're going to build this super speed highway, and it's going to be for the cool kids, and you get on the super speed, and everybody else is on this deteriorating interstate that is for the old timers, I guess. And my view of it's more like the Autobahn, right? I want to build an Autobahn, and if you are driving a bunch of kids in a school bus and you're going to make stops and you're going to go safe and slow in the right lane, fine. That's what you do. That's your business need. Fine. If you want to go fast and you have a Porsche and you know how to drive a Porsche fast, or a Ferrari, or in this Sanjeev's case, a Mercedes, then you drive fast, right? It's not up to me to dictate how fast or slow the business wants to go, what risks the business wants to take, how they're determining what their criteria is for delivery. Now, there's some things that you can't compromise, right? You can't compromise performance, you can't compromise security, but my goal is to give the business that capability then to go as fast, as slow, whatever they need to do, whatever speed is right for them, but build that same infrastructure to do that. So because you need to have visibility across all your work, because you will invariably, as Sanjeev was saying and Brad was saying before, and your gear example, Alan, you're going to have some dependencies, right? It's nice to talk about microservices. It's nice to talk about API management, and those are important things for the future. But when you have legacy systems, 2,000 applications, 5 to 10,000 people in IT, those things are still not going to change overnight. You're going to have dependencies. You need that visibility, and you need the opportunity, like on a highway, or to go fast when you can go fast, then when you need to go slow, you go slower, and that's my goal. So that's what's kind of my reaction initially, is I didn't want to take the approach of I'm going to build different technologies or different to serve different needs. Obviously, the more automation, the faster you can go, the more automated testers you have. If you can start doing small batch sizes, microservices, great. You're going to be going fast. But if you're not there yet, I still want to allow you to go as fast as you need to, because we still have a need to deliver, be responsive to the business.
Sanjeev, Mr. Mercedes?
No, I like that idea, and that's what I like about the whole multi-speed IT concept, right? To me, it's a continuum, and you have these lanes, and you pick which lane provides the right cycle time for your particular business need of your application or service or component which you need. The trick there is, how do I first decouple myself from the kind of the other services and components I am dependent upon, or they are dependent upon me, so I'm not slowing them down or going too fast for them. And the whole idea of which Brad talked about earlier, about using microservices, or even if it's not yet microservices, you have well-defined APIs and well-defined architectures so that each component and service can be released independently of the other one. is very important. But that requires you to have 3 touch points between different. So if you just use the word bimodal, between your 2 modes, right? First at the planning stage, so that everybody has visibility, as Carmen said, as to what needs to be delivered when, what are the requirements, what are the architectural requirements the consumer of my service have, what are the architectural requirements of the services I'm going to consume, so that I can architect and deliver my component or service properly and effectively. The second touch point is during testing. How do I virtualize the components around me, which I need in order to test my components, so that I'm not waiting for folks to come around? And the SkyTap folks are a great example for that, right? They don't only help you do that from a service perspective, but also from an environment perspective. So there's no contention about environment. There's no contention about what's available, what's not available. And I'll let Brad elaborate on how they do that. And the third touch point is at release time. Because as I mentioned earlier, the business cares about releasing and delivering complete business capabilities. They don't care if my service is ready if that service can't be consumed by anybody else, right? So I have a great authentication service, right? And it can authenticate anybody based on their Google ID or Twitter ID or LinkedIn ID or whatever. I got 20 different services for my web app which my consumers can use. But if the backend service, which allows the customer to actually process the transaction, isn't ready, what good is my authentication service? Or vice versa. If the backend service, which allows somebody to file an insurance claim, is ready, but the login service is not available, customers can't log in, what good is that also? So the release management part, so planning, decoupling during testing, and release management for doing these hybrid multi-component releases is very critical. Now, given the current state, we have large monolithic applications. This is not easy. Future state, where we are moving towards microservices with well-defined APIs and smaller releasable components, I think this problem will become easier to solve. And you can have different services, microservices releasing at different cycle times, and you won't have as much of a drag being caused by one on the other. But today, it's not easy, and people need to recognize that in order to implement bimodal or multi-speed, whatever you call it, there's a lot of planning and technology, and in some cases, architectural refactoring that will need to be done in order to make it work.
Yeah.
So, Carmen, Brad, I'll punt it back to you.
I was going to say, I'm looking at some of the questions here on the side and talking about, being a bimodal proponent or something. The way I take bimodal, again, it's just a word that people can interpret different ways, but I don't think of it as a goal. It's not that companies are trying to get to bimodal IT or multi-speed IT. I think it's a description of the current state of the world. And so when we are talking to our customers, we're not going in there and saying, hey, we can help you get to bimodal IT or multi-speed IT or something. What we're usually saying is that here's a way to view your workloads, which is very often true in large enterprises. And often what they're trying to do is make sure that when they've identified those different speeds that they're not bottlenecks, and they're trying to remove the constraints from, say, the slower ones if they're holding up the faster ones. So at least for me, I don't know that in my interpretation of the word multi-speed IT or the phrase multi-speed IT, people aren't trying to get to that. It's a way to look at their problem set and understand it. And you want to be able to ship everything, as we've sort of said over and over again, at the speed it needs or the speed the business needs. And that may mean taking lessons from both the processes and the technology involved in your faster, newer applications and applying those to your more traditional applications.
Guys, I think you're all right on point with this. And one other kind of aspect I want to bring out and get your comments on. So I think there's a certain school, though, especially when you use the term bimodal versus, let's say, multi-speed, where the connotation is, well, that's old stuff, and there's not much we could do with it. We're just going to let it mosey on along in the 35-mile-an-hour lane, and we're going to build all this new stuff to go in the Autobahn speed. And And that's okay, right? Where, that's how these organizations, there's not the concept of making them mesh, of syncing them together. All three of you seem to be more on the syncing it together side rather than letting one kind of just mosey along as the other one hums. And that, I think fundamentally, therein lies the rub, right? Are you content to just let the old jalopy mosey along, or do you try to hitch it and make it work in concert with your shiny new whatever Mercedes in Sanjeev's case? We're going to give Sanjeev a new moniker, but I mean, what is it there? Do we, and I think to me that's the fundamental problem here, right? No one, I don't think you got to be a genius to realize that not everything can go a million miles an hour, but how do you make the different pieces work together, or just say, hey, they're going to work separate and apart, but we're going to work around that. Carmen, we're getting out of time. Just maybe the last one, but
I mean, I think that's the challenge, right? So our approach is we're building something that sort of works with current state and the future state of where we want it to go. So we're going to make our current way of doing business better, more integrated, more visible across that pipeline. We're going to remove some of those wait states, but then as we get better, then you'll just be able to take advantage of that with the foundation we put in place. So it's not, to me, an either-or choice. It's we want to provide that solution, that capability, that delivery pipeline, that visibility, that work will make what we're doing today better, and as we're getting better, applying some of these other concepts, so it'll just go even more smoothly there. So I think that's really the world that enterprises have to live in, right? You can't just focus on the future state. You have to be able to address how you're going to transition and provide that capability to do that, so that you can get better and stay in business, so you're there for the future state, and which we can then take advantage of.
So guys, I'm going to need to pop in right now because we're a minute past the top of the hour. I think we've laid a great groundwork for a terrific session at Interconnect. And just if anyone, Sanjeev, I know you'll remember. Do you know when this session at Interconnect is on for anyone who may be listening?
Yes, it's a panel we'll be doing, and it's going to be at 1:15 p.m. Local time. It is session number DES 1493, DevOps for bi-modal IT. Everybody who's here will be on the panel. We also actually have Topo Pal, who's a fellow and technical director at Capital One, who will be joining us for that panel. So it's in the Mandalay Bay Hotel, and if you go into your Interconnect mobile app, you can look it up, DevOps for bi-modal IT. The session number, if you want it, is DES 1493. So look forward to have you all there, and we want to make it more interactive there. Here we couldn't have too many questions come in, but there we'll have a live audience. So if you are there, come ask us questions, right? We'll make it interactive. That's the goal.
I think we've got a great basis to build on from here. Brad, thank you, Brad Schick, SkyTap. Thank you so much for attending today. Look forward to seeing you on this panel at Interconnect, as well as some other folks from the SkyTap team I know will be out there.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Carmen, as always, a pleasure.
Thanks, Alan. Pleasure's mine.
Okay. This is Alan Schimmel, and thanks very much to IBM for sponsoring today's Google Hangout. Quick reminder, February 10th. We're getting a nooko here, I'm sorry. February 10th, we have another Hangout with Jim, myself, and a few others as we discuss enterprise moving. I don't have the topic in front of me. It's enterprise at startup speed, something to that effect. Innovate like a startup, scale for the enterprise, excuse me. And that's that. We'll see you on February 10th, and we'll see you all in Vegas at Interconnect. Thank you very much. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com. Have a great day.